Welcome to Wild Side, your wild true crime podcast.
We're your hosts, who are sisters, storytellers, and truth seekers.
I'm Bailey, a therapist who is fascinated by all weird and dark human behaviors.
And I'm Chelsea, an educator here to unearth the facts behind the cases.
We cover true crime because some cases are just too dark to forget,
and others are too wild to ignore.
We're so glad you're here, so buckle up
and enjoy the ride. Hey guys, we're here in February.
In February.
Did the groundhog see his shadow? Do we know?
I don't know.
I don't think he ever, I don't know why we still do that. I think that's the silliest thing.
I'm not sure. But my husband still hasn't asked me to be his Valentine, so I may or may not be divorced by the end of the month.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
So this might not be news, just like as a random thing. I just told Chelsea about it and she hadn't heard about it. And so I didn't know if you guys had heard about it. But there are claims that they have identified who Jack the Ripper was.
Yeah, it really is. I think we're in we're in the digital age, right? And we're in this age of advanced technology. And some of this stuff really blows my mind because I'm like, how can you get DNA evidence? Because that was what you were saying, right, Bailey? It was a DNA link off of this shawl.
Yeah.
Right?
So this guy, this Russell Edwards guy, purchased the shawl of which victim was it? Catherine Eddowes, the victim in 1888. He purchased her shawl at an auction in 2007 and started working with genealogists, and basically through genealogy tracked down family members of an individual by the name of Aaron Kosminski, who was a Polish barber who had immigrated and lived in that area of London. And so they found his DNA and Catherine's DNA on it, kind of saying this is proof, this is DNA proof that this is who the killer was. And I think, and I haven't looked into it yet, this is just from something I read today, but apparently he was also a suspect back in the time, but there wasn't any evidence on him by police. Yeah. So there's some overlap there, but there's still some controversy obviously around it.
I don't know. Like I said, I think we're going to be pretty amazed at hopefully some of the cold cases that get solved over the next handful of years just because of our technology. I truly do hope that's the case. And yeah, maybe even some of these historic cases. But if you are like Bailey and not a fan of a historic case, then today's case will be right up your alley, as it happened in 2024, just last year. Not even a full year ago.
Not even a full year ago. And I've actually had this on my spreadsheet,
radar,
if you will. Yeah, my spreadsheet of cases. And I actually went down the rabbit hole around the time it was happening, but I didn't want to put anything together until there was some more legal progress. And there has been some legal progress. And since there's been more autopsy reports and that kind of thing, it made me more comfortable to put this all together for us to put this all together now.
Yeah.
So without further ado, you guys, this is going to be a pretty wild case around a pretty radical group of God's misfits and the murder of Veronica Butler and Jilian Kelley.
And if you're wondering who God's misfits are, don't worry. We're about to give you as much information as we possibly can. It was March 30th, 2024. Veronica Butler and Jilian Kelley set out on what would have been a routine trip, a court-ordered visitation to Veronica's 2 children. The Oklahoma Panhandle was a familiar drive, but this day would take a horrific turn. What Veronica and Jilian didn't know was that this trip wasn't about visitation. It was about a setup. a trap orchestrated by God's Misfits, a group whose beliefs and paranoia turned them into monsters.
By nightfall, the women would be missing. Their family, friends, and even the small town of Hugoton, Kansas would begin unraveling a nightmare. But before we delve further into the events of that fateful day, let's take a moment to truly remember who Veronica and Jilian were, not as victims of this tragedy, but as the vibrant women whose lives brought love, light, and meaning to those around them.
Jilian Dolores Kelley was born on June 3, 1984, to her adoring parents Theodore Joe and Callie Ann Dalby, who instilled in her the values of faith, compassion, and resilience. On October 11, 2002, Jilian married her husband Heath Whitney Kelley, and together they built a life centered on love, faith, and family. They went on to have 4 children: Jalen Grace, Alexis Joanne, Derek Whitney, and Tyler Joe. Jilian was a mama bear, a fierce protector, advocate, and lover, with her greatest joy being her family. But she was also a gentle soul with unwavering kindness that touched everyone who knew her. As the secretary at the First Christian Church in Hugoton, where Heath served as a pastor, Jillian's faith-driven service radiated through every role she undertook. She led by example, embodying the virtues of grace, compassion, and humility in both her personal and spiritual life. Jilian was a guiding light for the children in her congregation, nurturing their faith through her leadership at Wednesday Night Olympian and Gopher Buddies Children's Church. Her ability to connect with young hearts and guide them towards a deeper relationship with the Lord was a reflection of her boundless love and devotion. Outside of her roles as a pastor's wife and mother, Jilian found joy in the simple, meaningful moments of life. She loved traveling with Heath and her children, cheering passionately for the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and feeling the wind on her face as she rode her cherished hot rod motorcycle. Whether attending every sporting event her children participated in or supporting her church community, Jillian's presence was a source of warmth and encouragement. Jillian's generosity of spirit wasn't limited to her family or church community. It extended to anyone in need of support, including those facing life's toughest challenges. Among them was Veronica Butler, a young mother navigating a difficult custody battle. Jilian became not only a mentor, but a steadfast friend to Veronica, offering guidance, compassion, and unwavering support during her darkest moments.
Veronica Claire Butler was born on February 28, 1997, to Clinton Butler and Amanda Verner. Her life was defined by her unwavering dedication to caring for others. As a CNA, a certified nursing assistant, Veronica poured her heart into her work, with her diligence and compassion never going unnoticed. She earned her respect and admiration from colleagues and residents alike due to her lovable nature and hard work ethic. Veronica's ambition to better herself was evident in her pursuit of higher education. She was attending Seward County Community College, working toward her goal of becoming a surgical tech. Her determination to achieve her dreams was a testament to her strength and resilience, even amidst major personal challenges. A woman of deep faith, Veronica's love for Jesus was central to her life. As a devoted member of the Assembly of God Church, she dedicated her time to serving others through various church activities. She was an active leader with the 180 Youth on Wednesday nights and contributed to the Blessings Bags initiative, embodying her commitment in helping those in need. From her childhood, Veronica's faith guided her, and her service to her community reflected her steadfast devotion to her Lord. Veronica found love and companionship with her partner, Tracy Lee Peets. Together, since February of 2019, the couple shared a deep connection built on mutual values and unwavering support for one another. Tracy stood by Veronica through her struggles, including the most difficult battle of her life, an ongoing custody dispute with Tiffany Adams, her ex-mother-in-law of sorts. The custody battle over Veronica's 2 children began in early 2019 and became a drawn-out, grueling process filled with court hearings and legal hurdles. Despite the emotional toll, Veronica remained steadfast in her fight, determined to secure a stable and loving future for her children.
The custody battle was a raw and emotionally charged ordeal. The children's father, Wrangler Rickman, was Tiffany Adams' son and Veronica's ex-boyfriend. According to court documents, Veronica's visitation with her children, then 6 and 8, was to be supervised every Saturday as mandated by a court order. Tiffany Adams, the children's grandmother, selected Cheryl Brune to oversee these visits, with Adams being responsible for covering the supervision fees. If Veronica opted for a different supervisor, she would be requested to cover the session costs. On March 30th, 2024, Cheryl Brune was unavailable to supervise the visit, prompting Veronica to contact one of her approved supervisors. She reached out to her good friend Jilian Kelley, who agreed to supervise the visitation. On that morning, Veronica told family members that she was going to pick up her children from her ex-mother-in-law, Tiffany Adams, at 10 a.m. at Four Corners. It was an intersection of Highway 95 and US 64 West in Texas County, Oklahoma. The spot is a little more than an intersection of 2 highways, about 50 miles southwest of Hugoton. The women were traveling to the agreed-upon transaction location in Oklahoma from Hugoton, Kansas. The 2 women arrived at the location about 9:40 that morning. Veronica was planning to take her daughter to a birthday party, but when they didn't show up, alarms started ringing. Veronica's family members were soon notified. Something was terribly wrong. Friends Melissa and Joey Padilla and family members immediately went searching for the 2 women. According to the Oklahoma Highway Patrol, they ended up finding Veronica's vehicle just south of Elkhart, Kansas. The car was found abandoned down a dirt path just off Oklahoma Highway 95 and Road L in Texas County, Oklahoma. It was a spot Veronica would likely have known well because just down the road is the Yarborough School, where Veronica graduated in 2015. Shortly after this discovery, which was around noon, the Padillas ended up contacting law enforcement to notify them of the abandoned vehicle and their concerns for the now missing women, Veronica and Jilian.
When law enforcement arrived at the scene, they immediately began to search the area and inspect the vehicle. It didn't take long for troubling signs to emerge, raising suspicions of foul play. Blood was found on the roadway and along the edge, further intensifying everyone's concerns. Veronica's glasses lay on the road near the vehicle, close to a broken hammer. Inside Jillian's purse, officers recovered a gun magazine, but there was no gun to be found. Within hours, the Texas County Sheriff's Department posted a missing persons alert on social media, sharing details about the women's physical appearances and photos, hoping for any leads. The discovery of these unsettling clues turned what seemed like a routine visit into a full-scale investigation. As the possibility of foul play loomed, the following day, now March 31st, local law enforcement reached out to the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, or the OSBI, requesting their assistance in what was now being treated as a, quote, suspicious disappearance. The OSBI quickly took over, realizing there were numerous oddities surrounding Veronica Butler and Jilian Kelley's vanishing. One of their first points of interest was Tiffany Adams, the children's grandmother, who was at the heart of the custody dispute. When questioned by the OSBI, Tiffany Adams stated that on the night of March 29th, the night before the women went missing, her grandchildren had stayed at the home of Barrett and Lacey Cook. She said she planned to pick up the children the following morning, before Veronica's scheduled visitation. At 9 a.m., Tiffany claimed that she called Veronica to confirm the arrangement, and according to Tiffany, Veronica had told her that something had come up and she would be unable to make it. Veronica's phone records confirmed that a call from Tiffany took place at 9 a.m. on the morning of her disappearance.
However, investigators uncovered a crucial discrepancy. Veronica was in Hugoton, Kansas at that time, in the process of picking up Jilian to head to Four Corners for the visitation. So yes, she made a call at 9 a.m., but she was not where Tiffany explained she would be. Investigators also learned that Tiffany did pick up the children from the cook's residence, but this occurred before noon. Tiffany claimed that, believing Veronica had canceled the visitation, she allowed the children to stay with the cooks for the morning. Further investigation into the phone records revealed that both Veronica and Jillian's phones were active, pinging cell towers until 9:42 a.m. that morning. After that, no data was transmitted from either of their phones, and neither phone was found in the abandoned vehicle or the surrounding area. In hopes to gain more clarity, investigators spoke with Cheryl Brune, the originally scheduled supervisor, and learned a new piece of the complex puzzle. Cheryl revealed that she had actually been available on March 30th to supervise the visitation, but Tiffany had told her to take the weekend off. When Cheryl questioned why, Tiffany explained that she wanted a few weeks off to meet with the children and ask them about the other approved supervisors to determine if they were, quote, appropriate individuals for the job. This was a very interesting piece of information for investigators. Due to this, the OSBI and local law enforcement began questioning everyone connected to the case. Friends, family, Veronica's ex, and good old Grandma Tiffany. And what investigators uncovered painted a picture of a deeply tangled and hostile custody battle.
As a matter of fact, just days before the women vanished, court records revealed that motions had been filed on March 18th and again on March 20th requesting extended visitation for Veronica. A hearing had been scheduled for April 17th, less than a month away. According to Veronica's attorney, her relationship with her ex-boyfriend Wrangler, and especially with his mother Tiffany, was increasingly strained. Tiffany had a history of obstructing Wrangler's attempts to see his children, despite him being their legal custodian. In fact, there were instances where law enforcement had to intervene to ensure that Wrangler could pick up his children from his mother. The OSBI also delved into the history of the custody dispute and interviewed Wrangler's grandmother, Debbie Knox Davis. During this interview, she revealed a chilling statement from Wrangler made earlier that year in February. He allegedly said, quote, "No one's going to have to worry about the custody battle much longer because my mom has it under control. She knows the path the judge takes to work and will take out Veronica at drop-off." As investigators dug deeper, they found recordings of Wrangler discussing death threats allegedly made by his mother Tiffany and her boyfriend Tad Cullum. This raised immediate suspicions about Wrangler's involvement, but there was only one big glaring issue. Wrangler had a solid alibi. At the time of the women's disappearance, Wrangler was actually in a rehab in Oklahoma City, so this was a dead end.
Regardless, mounting evidence suggested investigators were on the right trail, so the focus shifted squarely to Grandma Tiffany. On April 1st, OSBI agents obtained a search warrant for Tiffany's cell phone records and conducted a forensic extraction. What they uncovered was shocking. A series of web searches related to the pain levels of a taser gun shops in the area, prepaid cellular phones, and how to get someone out of their house. These disturbing findings only intensified the investigation into Tiffany Adams and her associates. By April 3rd, the OSBI had gathered enough evidence to publicly state that, based on the information obtained from the victim's vehicle, investigators believe there was evidence to indicate foul play. The OSBI continued to follow every lead that could possibly tie Tiffany Adams to the disappearance of Veronica and Jilian. Their focus returned to the cell phone records obtained from Tiffany's phone, particularly the searches she had conducted. Among these, they found searches for local gun shops, prompting investigators to visit various stores in the area. Their efforts paid off when they uncovered a crucial piece of evidence, a receipt from Big R in Guyman, Oklahoma, showing that Tiffany had purchased 5 stun guns on March 23, 2024. Further digging revealed that Tiffany had also purchased 3 prepaid cell phones from Walmart in Guyman, Oklahoma on February 13, 2024. I don't know what she had plans for February 14th, Valentine's Day that year, but Bailey, I don't think that I would want to be involved in those plans.
I think as we go through this, it'll be general consensus that nobody wants to be involved with anything regarding Grandma Tiffany.
Oh, man.
Armed with this new information, investigators obtained a search warrant for the 3 numbers associated with the burner phones. What they uncovered was very concerning. The phones had been activated at different times leading up to the disappearance, but the most significant revelation came on the day of the women's disappearance on March 30th. All 3 phones had been active in the area where Veronica's car was found and near the last known location of both women. Even more troubling, these phones had been activated and connected to a cellular network for the first time at or near the residence of Tad Collum. Remember, Grandma Tiffany's boyfriend. This discovery immediately linked Tad Collum to the case, raising more questions about Tiffany's involvement. Further investigation revealed that 2 of the phones had been traced back to the residence of Cora and Cole Twombly, a couple who were close friends with Tiffany Adams. The Twombleys owned a cattle company located about 40 miles away from Boise City, Oklahoma. While the full details of their involvement were not initially clear, on April 3rd of 2024, the OSBI followed a critical lead and traveled to Carrick, Texas to interview a key witness. The teenage daughter of Cora Twombly and her ex-partner, Colby White, referred to only as CW. When questioned by investigators, CW revealed a damning conversation she had overheard. She explained that she had heard her mother, Cora, along with her stepfather, Cole, Grandma Tiffany, Tad Callum, and another individual by the name of Paul Grice, discussing their involvement in the deaths of Veronica Butler and Jilian Kelley. According to CW, Grandma Tiffany had provided the group with burner phones to communicate without using their personal devices. Also, CW revealed that she had seen 2 of these burner phones actually charging on her mother's nightstand, further implicating the group in this crime. As the investigation continued to unravel, the connections between Tiffany Adams, her associates, and the disappearance of Veronica and Jilian grew more tangled and disturbing. But the story did not stop there. There was another, darker layer to uncover. Investigators began to piece together the involvement of a group known as God's Misfits, a name that would soon be tied to the core suspects in this case.
God's Misfits. God's Misfits, it wasn't just a name. It was a representation of a dangerous, fractured group of individuals, each playing a role in a web of manipulation, deceit, and violence. As it turns out, God's Misfits was an anti-government religious group that consisted of people like Tad Cullum, Grandma Tiffany's boyfriend, who appeared to be at the heart of all of it, alongside other key figures like Paul Grice, a friend and associate of the Twombleys, and Cora and Cole Twombly themselves. Apparently, this cult-like group met weekly at the Twombly's residence and at the home of Barrett and Lacey Cook. Remember those names? It appears that God's Misfits have beliefs similar to the sovereign citizen movement, mixed with QAnon conspiracies, believing things like they can ignore laws and court orders because they have freed themselves from an illegitimate and oppressive government. But just as a fun fact, to show the hypocrisy of these individuals, their religious anti-government club didn't stop them from accepting government farm subsidies. According to an article by Max McCoy, Tiffany Adams took at least $134,000 in subsidies since 2013. She took $2,828 in crop rotation payments in October 24, according to the USDA. Hypocrite much? As the OSBI delved deeper into the lives of these suspects, they learned that the relationship between Tiffany Adams and her associates went beyond mere friendship. It was a tangled mix of loyalty, resentment, and an insidious thirst for control. God's Misfits weren't just bystanders in this story. They were the orchestrators who, for some reason still unknown, seemed to have formed an alliance that led them down this dark path. They operated in the shadows, using burner phones to conceal their actions, and possibly orchestrated the deaths of Veronica Butler and Jilian Kelley. While publicly extolling the virtues of American rural life and proclaiming their faith in God, they still seem to have embraced some of the 7 deadly sins, including pride and wrath, and broke more than a few commandments, possibly even murder.
As the investigation into the disappearance of Veronica and Jilian advanced, the disturbing connections between the suspects and this group known as God's Misfits began to surface with increasing clarity. This group, bound by loyalty, secrecy, and dangerous motives, was beginning to unravel in ways that investigators just had not been able to anticipate. Among those with critical information, again, was CW, the teenage daughter of Cora, whose reports shed light on even more unsettling details. In her conversation with investigators, she ended up telling them that the night before Veronica and Jilian disappeared, her mother, Cora, and her stepfather, Cole, had told her that they were going on a, quote, mission. This cryptic statement, along with their odd behavior, immediately raised red flags. When CW woke up on the morning of March 30th, Cora and Cole were gone, and they did not return until around noon. And when they did, their actions were anything but normal. CW was instructed to clean out both vehicles they had taken, a blue and gray Chevy pickup, which was jointly owned by Cora and Cole, and a blue flatbed truck owned by Cole. Curious, CW asked her mother what had happened, and Cora's response was chilling. She said, "Things didn't go as planned, but we don't have to worry about Veronica again." This statement hinted at something really sinister, suggesting that the Twombleys, along with the rest of this weird cult-like group of the God's Misfits, were involved in a plot that had gone really horribly wrong. As investigators got more information, what seems to start to piece together is that Cora and Cole had likely been a part of Veronica and Jilian's disappearance, and they had actually been the ones to block the road to prevent Veronica and Jilian from reaching their destination. In fact, forcing them to take a detour toward a location where Tiffany, Tad, and Paul were waiting. In the eyes of God's misfits, Jilian was seen as equally guilty simply because she was on Veronica's side in this bitter custody dispute. This emerging connection between the group's actions and the missing women's fate painted a chilling picture of a coordinated plot driven by vengeance and control.
Her testimony unveiled even more disturbing revelations: attempts on Veronica's life earlier that year. According to CW, the same group, this God's Misfits, had traveled to Hugoton, Kansas with plans to kill Veronica. The plan was that once Veronica left her home and got into her car, the group would position themselves in front of her, then throw an anvil. Yeah, an anvil, one of those heavy iron blocks used in metalworking, off the back of a truck, making it look like an accident. Fortunately, Veronica had never left her house that day, narrowly escaping the danger. This information piqued the OSBI's interest, especially because it aligned with the details found in Tiffany's phone search, where she had looked up how to, quote, get someone out of their house. Grandma Tiffany's second plan was to lure Veronica and her visitation supervisor into a horse trailer when they picked up Veronica's kids. Meanwhile, back in Texas, while the OSBI were speaking with CW and processing this information, Cora and Cole Twombly unexpectedly arrived on the scene. They attempted to gain access to CW and her brother, with Cora becoming verbally aggressive towards the OSBI agent. She was furious, accusing them of interviewing her minor child without permission. Cole stormed out of the vehicle, visibly agitated, with a gun tucked into his belt. It was a clear display of the dangerous environment surrounding this case, one that now appeared to be spiraling out of control.
After Cora and Cole Twombly's confrontation with the OSBI, the situation became even more tense. The agents, now understandably on high alert, had to quickly assess the growing danger. The arrival of Cora and Cole, especially with Cole openly displaying a firearm, only reinforced the gravity of the situation. Cora's aggressive behavior raised suspicions, and it was clear that they had not only attempted to block the investigation, but also sought to intimidate CW and her brother into silence. The OSBI agents swiftly de-escalated the encounter, ensuring that Cora and Cole didn't interfere with the investigation any further. They also made sure that the children were protected from any further threats. The agents, now armed with even more crucial information, continued to dig deeper into the ties between the Twombleys and God's Misfits. With this new layer of insight into the behavior of the suspects, the investigation reached a pivotal moment. The connection between the Twombleys, Tiffany Adams, and Tad Cullum to the disappearance of Veronica and Jilian became absolutely undeniable. The OSBI realized they were dealing with a group who was willing to go to extreme lengths to protect their interests, no matter the cost. The evidence gathered from the burner phones, the vehicle searches, and now with CW's testimony put the investigation into overdrive. Investigators began working quickly to compile all of the information, making sure every lead was followed. But with the Twombleys becoming more volatile, it became clear that time was of the essence. The OSBI knew they needed to act fast before anyone else could be hurt or silenced.
I think we all remember the cell phone data that was discovered earlier. Well, again, as seems to be the theme in the story, it takes a darker, more incriminating turn. Between 10:16 and 10:35 a.m., after Veronica and Jilian had disappeared, two of the burner phones were traced to a property owned by a man named Jamie Beasley. This property was located about 8.5 miles from where Veronica's vehicle was found, about a 34-minute drive. This timing coincided precisely with when Veronica and Jilian's phones went silent and stopped pinging, further confirming the connection between their disappearance and this location. What's even more chilling is that all of the prepaid phones linked to both the suspects and the victims ceased transmitting signals that same morning, with the last known location being near both Twombly's residence and Beasley's property. Upon investigating Beasley's land, which was situated below a dam in a secluded pasture, authorities made a troubling discovery. Fresh dirt work was evident in the area. Concrete had been moved and a hole had been dug, filled back in, and covered with hay, raising suspicions that the perpetrators had attempted to conceal something there. The scene at Beasley's property only deepened the sense of foreboding as investigators continued to piece together the timeline of events and the sinister motives behind the disappearance of Veronica and Jilian.
Jamie Beasley confirmed that the dirt work had been done by none other than Tad Cullum. He had said that Tad used a skid steer on March 29th and completed during the early hours of March 30th. By noon that same day, the skid steer was gone. Beasley further explained that Callum rents the pasture property for cattle grazing and has unrestricted access to it at any time. The following day, on March 31st, Callum had approached Beasley with a startling comment. He said, "Hey, people are looking for me for the disappearance of those two girls," and went on to suggest that having skid steer tracks on the property without the actual skid steer present would raise suspicion. I mean, yes. Initially, Beasley considered covering for Callum, offering to tell investigators that he had been doing tree work and dirt work for him. But as law enforcement began questioning Beasley, he realized the depth of the consequences he could face for lying to federal authorities. Fearing the consequences, Beasley eventually admitted to Tad Cullum's involvement in the dirt work conducted just days before Veronica and Jilian disappeared. This revelation provided investigators with the evidence needed to move forward. And with that, on April 13th, 2024, a heavily armed law enforcement team launched a series of arrests in Oklahoma's Cimarron and Texas counties. Tad Burt Cullum, 43, was taken into custody, but he was not the only one. 2 weeks after Veronica and Jilian's disappearance, authorities also arrested Grandma Tiffany Adams, 54, along with Cole Earl Twombly, 50, and his wife Cora Gail Twombly, 44. The four were charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of kidnapping, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. They were booked into the Texas County Jail as the investigation pressed forward. Even though there were no bodies found, there was enough evidence to assume that something really bad had happened, and these 4 were at the center.
With arrests made and the investigation accelerating, the case took a grim turn. On April 14th, 2024, the discovery of 2 bodies in rural Texas County, Oklahoma. The remains were sent to the medical examiner's office for identification. Just 2 days later, on April 16th, the OSBI announced the devastating truth emerged. A 2-day excavation unearthed a chest freezer buried beneath a concrete slab on Jamie Beasley's remote property. The freezer, measuring 4.5 feet long by 27 inches wide by 35 inches high, was tightly sealed with a yellow ratchet strap and buried approximately 8 feet underground. Fresh dirt surrounded the site, and a strategically placed hay bale concealed the burial spot. Only 8.5 miles from where the women's abandoned vehicle was discovered, the scene painted a chilling picture of calculated concealment. Inside the freezer lay the bodies of Veronica Butler and Jilian Kelley, one stacked on top of the other. The interior also held dirt, hay, an Apple Watch, soiled shoes, and 2 gloves, 1 leather, 1 cloth. Beneath the freezer, investigators discovered additional items: a stun gun, tape, a sheathed knife, and discarded clothing. Fingerprint analysis and a visual comparison of tattoos later confirmed the identities of Veronica and Jilian, shattering the hopes of their loved ones.
That same morning, after families were notified of the horrific discovery, the community gathered for a church service to honor Veronica and Jilian. Streamed on YouTube, the service offered a message of collective grief yet resilience. Pastor Dave Mason shared that Heath Kelley, Jillian's husband, had requested prayers not only for the family, but also for those responsible for the crime, embodying an incredible act of forgiveness. Mason urged the congregation to respond with compassion in the face of unimaginable loss, reminding them that the world was watching. This powerful moment of grace and strength reflected the love that surrounded Veronica and Jilian in life, a love that will continue to honor their memory despite the darkness of their deaths. Upon discovering the bodies, investigators also discovered the cherry on top, forensically speaking. Back at the crime scene, some of the burner phones were found. The same burner phones traced back to Tiffany Adams's purchase. Inside, the investigators found not only just the bodies, but again, the additional evidence. All key pieces of evidence that would go on to forensically link the crime to the perpetrators.
All 4 individuals involved conspired and contributed to the deaths of Veronica Butler and Jilian Kelley. They were facing charges including first-degree murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy to commit murder. On April 24, 2024, Paul Grice became the 5th misfit to be arrested. With all major suspects in custody, authorities prepared to move forward with the prosecution. As the case moved towards trial, the families of Veronica and Jilian were left to grapple with the heartbreaking loss, seeking justice for the women whose lives had been cut tragically short. On December 17th, a preliminary hearing began in Texas County District Court for 3 of the 5 suspects: Tiffany Adams, 55, Tadbert Cullum, 44, and Cole Twombly, 50. 2 additional defendants, Paul Grice, 32, and Cora Twombly, 45, cooperated with the prosecution and were called to testify against the others. The purpose? To determine whether sufficient evidence existed to proceed to trial. According to an article by Josh Fiallo, phones and cameras were prohibited during the hearing, but News Nation reporter Brian Enton described the atmosphere in the Texas County courtroom as, quote, extremely emotional. Footage from outside showed the suspects being escorted into the courthouse one by one, wearing bulletproof vests, handcuffs, and orange and white striped jumpsuits. Grice and Cora Twombly, who had previously waived their rights to preliminary hearings, also arrived in handcuffs to testify.
I think just the fact that they had to be escorted in with bulletproof vests and handcuffed really shows a clear picture of the outrage in the community. People were pissed. They still are, and understandably so.
Yeah, I was going to say, rightly so.
The courtroom was tense as prosecutors laid out their case, unraveling the roles each suspect played in the chilling murders of Veronica Butler and Jilian Kelley. The testimony exposed not only the gruesome details of the crime, but also the twisted relationships within this self-proclaimed subgroup of God's misfits. This close-knit group, many of whom had grown up together in Oklahoma, had spiraled into a dark conspiracy driven by manipulation, delusion, and a bitter custody battle at the center. Now, the first to testify was 45-year-old Cora Twombly, who struck a deal with prosecutors to plead guilty to the murders in exchange for a 30-year sentence. Cora detailed how she and her husband Cole had begun exploring radical sovereign citizen ideologies when Paul Grice entered their lives. Grice, initially visiting to buy a puppy, became entangled in their radical discussions. Soon after, sometime later, Tiffany Adams and Tad Cullum joined the group. Tiffany and Cora bonded over their shared struggles as parents.
And over time, Tiffany began confiding in Cora about her custody battle with Veronica over her grandchildren. According to Cora, Tiffany manipulated the group into believing that Veronica's children were being abused by a family member of Veronica's.
Desperate and convinced they were protecting the children, Cora agreed to help. She told the court, quote, "I told her we needed to do what we needed to do to keep the kids safe."
Cora's admission revealed the extent of Tiffany's manipulation and the group's misguided sense of justice. What began as a superficial concern for the children spiraled into a deadly conspiracy driven by lies and paranoia. After several failed attempts at Veronica's life, the radical God's Misfits group devised a new plan that they would carry out on March 30th, 2024. Cora and Cole Twombly were to be the lookouts that fateful morning. Positioned strategically, they monitored the area to ensure no interruptions. According to testimony, Cora called Tiffany when they saw Veronica drive by the highway. Cora alerted Tiffany, setting their sinister plot in motion. However, instead of a swift and calculated ambush as intended, chaos unfolded. As Cora watched from her position as a lookout, she saw two figures bolting from the ambush site. Moments later, she witnessed Paul Grice struggling with Veronica to the ground. The situation had devolved into a violent, desperate struggle. Grice, overwhelmed by Veronica's resistance, shouted for assistance, his voice carrying an urgency that betrayed the unraveling plan. At this point, Tiffany, armed with a stun gun provided by Cora, intervened to help subdue Veronica. Moments later, Cora saw Grice on top of Veronica, stabbing her. Afterward, Cora destroyed the victim's cell phones, tried to cover up the bloodstains at the scene, and drove Tiffany home. To solidify her alibi, Cora and Cole even involved their daughter, CW, drawing her into the web of deception. This leads us to Paul Grice, the first killer.
Paul Grice's testimony was absolutely haunting. He admitted to being the one who fatally stabbed Veronica Butler, a murder he claimed Tiffany Adams orchestrated by quoting Bible verses and convincing him that Veronica's children were in danger. Grice described himself as, quote, brainwashed by evil, recounting the violent struggle that ended Veronica's life. During this struggle, he sliced his own hand with a knife, leaving behind the physical evidence that would later seal his fate. Grice recalled the chilling moment when Tiffany laughed after the murders, a haunting reminder of her callousness. Despite his actions, Grice claimed he testified to provide closure for the victims' families, saying that they deserved the honesty.
Grice's testimony may have offered a glimpse into the events of that fateful morning, but it also revealed the chilling extent of the group's depravity. While Grice claimed his honesty was for the victims' families, his actions spoke louder than his words. As the pieces of the puzzle came together, another key player in this horrifying crime emerged, none other than Tad Cullum, the second killer. Tad Cullum played a major role in the murders. He was the one who brutally stabbed and killed Jilian Kelley in what can only be described as a frenzied attack. Her only crime was being deemed guilty by association. She was at the wrong place at the wrong time. After the murders, both Paul Grice and Tad Cullum took part in concealing the evidence of their crimes. The men transported the remains of Veronica and Jilian to that remote burial site on Jamie Beasley's property. It was there where we now know Cullum dug a deep hole, and placed the women's bodies inside a freezer, sealing it shut with yellow ratchet straps before burying it 8 feet underground. Cullum had also discarded his clothing at the burial site, an act that proved damning when forensic analysis revealed traces of Jilian Kelley's blood on the fabric. Paul Grice threw away his own bloody clothing, the stun gun,
and the knife used to kill Veronica into the same burial site.
DNA analysis later confirmed the presence of both his and Veronica's DNA on the clothing. Additionally, components of the knife Cullum used in the murders were later discovered in his home, further cementing his direct involvement in the cold-blooded killings. Together, these details painted a grim and indisputable picture of their roles in the calculated and absolutely barbaric acts of violence.
But the keystone to this wicked web was Tiffany Adams, the mastermind, the orchestrator of this horrifying plot. She played a pivotal role in facilitating the murders, purchasing burner phones to ensure secret communication among the conspirators, and she also acquired the stun guns used to incapacitate the victims, one of which was later found at the burial site, and provided the yellow ratchet straps that secured the freezer containing the bodies. Tiffany even bought the pants Cullum wore and later discarded at the burial site, further implicating herself in the crime. The ultimate motive behind the murders came into sharp focus through Cora's testimony. Tiffany Adams' ruthless and calculated attempts to gain custody of Veronica's children. Facing financial constraints and unable to win the legal battle, Tiffany weaponized manipulation to achieve her goal. She carefully spun a web of lies, convincing her friends that Veronica's children were victims of abuse and that drastic action was necessary to, quote, protect them. Probably unsurprising, there was no actual evidence of any sort of abuse that the children were experiencing. This bitter custody dispute, fueled by Tiffany's relentless cruelty and deceit, escalated into a horrific conspiracy. She exploited the trust of those around her, preying on their vulnerabilities and twisting their perception to align with her own twisted agenda. Her actions set the stage for unimaginable violence, culminating in the brutal murders of Veronica Butler and Jilian Kelley. The roles each conspirator played painted a chilling picture of calculated brutality and cold-blooded collusion. What began as manipulation ended in a devastating act of violence, leaving behind shattered families, a grieving community, and a lingering sense of disbelief over the depth of cruelty one person could inflict to serve their own selfish desires.
The shocking revelation of Tiffany Adams' manipulations and the cold-blooded conspiracy she orchestrated only added to the horror that unfolded in the courtroom. However, the most harrowing details came from the testimony of the medical examiner
whose findings laid bare the unimaginable violence inflicted upon Veronica and Jilian. Each wound, each injury told a story of cruelty and suffering, physical evidence of the sheer brutality these women endured in their final moments. Dr. Celia Cobb, the Oklahoma medical examiner, delivered a sobering account of the horrific injuries each woman suffered, ultimately ruling both deaths as a homicide. Speaking of Veronica, Dr. Cobb noted that Veronica's defensive wounds told a heartbreaking story of resistance. Fighting for her life desperately, grabbing the knife, which resulted in deep slices to her fingers. Veronica had suffered a total of 30 sharp force injuries, 9 deep stab wounds, and 21 incised cuts. The wounds were distributed across her head, neck, torso, and extremities, painting a picture of a violent and desperate struggle. Among these injuries were deep cuts to her internal jugular veins. Dr. Cobb concluded that Veronica's death was likely due to the severity of her injuries and bled out quickly. And then Jilian. Dr. Cobb described Jilian Kelley's injuries, which illustrated in vivid detail her haunting final moments. According to Dr. Cobb, Jilian suffered a total of 16 sharp force injuries, including 9 deep stab wounds and 7 incised cuts. Most of these wounds were concentrated on the back of her head and neck, with others inflicted on her cheek and left shoulder. The depth and precision of the injuries fractured her vertebra and caused severe damage to her spinal cord, leaving her unable to move or breathe independently. These defensive wounds were found on her hands, which were evidence of her desperate attempt to fend off her attacker. Additionally, Dr. Cobb spoke to possible stun gun marks on her neck and shoulder, suggesting she may have been incapacitated before the fatal blows. Dr. Celia Cobb concluded that Jilian's death was very rapid due to the catastrophic spinal cord injuries. She was most likely already deceased before being placed in the freezer alongside Veronica.
The brutal murders of Veronica Butler and Jilian Kelley left an indelible mark on everyone who heard the details. Now everyone who was present had to listen to the details of unimaginable violence inflicted upon their loved one. How after Veronica and Jilian were mercilessly killed, their bodies then discarded, hidden away as though they were mere refuse, a testament to the callousness of their killers. Testimony from the medical examiner, coupled with confessions from Cora Twombly and Paul Grice, laid bare the horror of what truly happened. Every detail revealed premeditated cruelty and cold-blooded murder. The case shed light on the dangers of extremist ideologies and the vulnerabilities of individuals drawn into toxic groups like God's Misfits. It also raised unsettling questions about societal safeguards, how financial hardships, custody disputes, and unchecked beliefs converge to fuel such a horrific chain of events. When all the evidence was presented, Associate District Judge Clark Jett ruled there was sufficient evidence to send Tad Cullum, Tiffany Adams, and Cole Twombly to trial. The legal process is now set in motion. Tiffany Adams, having waived her rights to a preliminary hearing and a speedy trial, is scheduled to appear in court in April 2025. Cole Twombly, who waived his rights as well, will face the court the following month in May. Tad Cullum will also stand trial, as the rulings ensure each of them will answer for their alleged roles in their heinous crimes. While these trial dates mark a step towards accountability, they also remind us of the true heart of this case, Veronica and Jilian. The story isn't about courtroom proceedings or legal strategies. It's about the lives lost and the ripples of grief that continue to spread through their families, friends, and communities.
As the legal process continues, it is important to remember that justice is only part of the story. Again, the true heart of this case still lies in the lives of Veronica and Jilian, the two women whose light was extinguished far too soon and never deserved their horrible end. Their impact on the world and on the people who love them goes far beyond the courtroom, and their legacies deserve to be honored. To conclude this, let us shift our focus back to Jilian and Veronica, two extraordinary women whose lives were stolen in a senseless and unfathomable act of violence. Their stories deserve to be remembered, not for the cruelty they endured, but for the beauty and light they brought to the world.
Jilian was more than a mentor and a friend. She was a guiding force, someone who dedicated her life to nurturing others and sharing her faith. In her honor, a memorial was established for the First Christian Church of Hugoton, or Willow Christian Church of Indianola, Nebraska. Contributions to these memorials support one of Jillian's greatest joys, helping children grow in their relationship with Jesus. As we honor Jillian's memory, let us remember her as a woman who radiated kindness, love, and unwavering faith. Her legacy is one of hope and selflessness, a reminder to each of us to carry forward the light she so freely shared. Though her physical presence is gone, her spirit remains etched into the lives of those she touched.
Veronica was a pillar of strength and compassion. Her name, meaning truth and victory, symbolizes the way she lived her life, with courage, determination, and a deep love for those around her. A memorial was established for her children's education fund to ensure her children one day the option to enter a field that will hopefully bring them some happiness and joy. Veronica's spirit and unwavering love will forever inspire those who knew her. She was a beacon of hope, embodying resilience and kindness in every facet of her life. Her memory will live on, not only in her children, but also in the hearts of everyone who had the privilege of knowing her.
As we close this chapter, let us not allow the tragedy of their loss to overshadow the beauty of their lives. Jilian and Veronica were more than victims. They were mothers, friends, mentors, and women of faith who left a beautiful mark on the world. Their lives remind us of the power of love, the importance of community, and the responsibility we have to cherish and protect one another. May we honor their memories by seeking justice for their loss, by supporting their families, and by embodying the qualities they hold dear: compassion, strength, and a commitment to lifting others up. Let their legacies inspire us to be better, to love harder, and to carry their light forward in a world that desperately needs it.
And that, our dear listeners,
is the awful case of Veronica Butler and Jilian Kelley, who were killed by this weird, gross, radical group, God's Misfits. One of the things that I want to say, for those of y'all who know, obviously you guys should know by now, I'm a therapist, and there's something about Grandma Tiffany that really gets under my skin. And what is it with these older women with their weird ass obsessions with their grandchildren? This is so much like the Lisa Dom case. Do you remember?
I was thinking that the whole time. This really, I don't know. I feel like there needs to be parenting classes for grandparents sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're not the parent. You're a supporter, you're an advocate, you're all the things. But those aren't your babies.
Yes. They're not your children.
And I get it. There are some situations where, thank goodness for grandparents stepping in and playing important roles. But I have a feeling that it almost makes me wonder if the reason why Veronica and Ringler were in the situation that they were in had something to do with Grandma Tiffany.
Yeah, with her crazy self.
You know what I mean? Like her being in the middle
Yeah.
of everything.
Yeah. And it's just, she had to be very convincing to manipulate, four other people into planning and following through with murdering two people, right?
No.
And I don't know. It just really bothers me. This whole thing really bothers
So
me.
did we ever did they ever really say what the initial, like, was the plan always to kill the two girls, or did it escalate to
Yeah,
murder?
I mean, from my understanding, I think when they made the decision, that's why what was her name? Cheryl Brune. That's
Mhm.
why Grandma Tiffany told her not to go, because they were going to kill the other person. From my understanding, I think that they knew that Jillian was usually the person that, because you can't just bring anybody, you have to bring a
Right.
list that the court approved. And Jillian was on Veronica's list of approved supervisors
Right.
for these visitations. And
Hmm.
she was a good friend. She'd used her before. And yeah, they didn't care, essentially. Like, I don't know. I just think it just goes to show how easily or how good people are at brainwashing to literally murder. You know, and this, from what they're saying, is they wanted to, they all got behind and justified the murder of Veronica because she was probably a terrible mother, according to Grandma Tiffany, and her kids were being abused, which there's no evidence of that. So they're like, yeah, we got to protect the kids. But it went so far that it justified killing another completely innocent bystander in this process, which was Jillian, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I think I mean, how many hours do we have in a lifetime to try to unpack all of this? You know what I mean? Like all the elements of it. And
Like, how many licks does it take to get to the center of this crazy lollipop, right?
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just feel like it really, I don't, as a listener to this, I feel like you don't even know what questions to start asking, right? You know, like, well, why were they all involved in this? And why are they all so angry? And why are they all so, you know, clinging to this conspiracy theory? You know what I mean? Like there's so many whys. And again, the end result is that two innocent women and generations of trauma will now ensue because of it. And it's just sad.
Yeah,
So,
because
um,
Grandma Tiffany is off her rocker.
man, no joke. We did include the memorials that we spoke of, Jilian Kelley's memorial and also Veronica Butler, and donations can be made to those. We'll have those in our show notes. And, you know, I think that repeating that last line is just, you know, let their legacy inspire us to be better. We got to love hard. We got to carry light in this world. And I hate to say it, but we also have to be cautious. You know, even as optimistic as I love to be, that's one thing that I have learned from being around a very, for having, or from being around a very cautious husband is it, it's okay to be cautious.
Yeah. And the last thing that we'll say is there is a Justice for Veronica and Jillian Facebook page. It's
Mhm.
Justice KS Moms, Veronica Butler and Jilian Kelley. And some of the most recent posts are some requests for GoFundMe's for Veronica's dad, Clinton, to help keep the family home, because there's
Mhm.
been a lot
Mhm.
of fees that have gone into this horrific process. So it is a public group. It's a private group, but you can go add that, and I will link the GoFundMe in our show notes as well. So I'm sure anything helps the families just to make things a little bit financially easier for them in this grueling post horror process that they're going to have to go through.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's our duty as neighbors, neighbors across the nation, across the world even, to put, even if it's not monetary, prayers and good wishes or just spreading the story, spreading awareness, really does help. So,
well, as always, guys, thanks for hanging out with us. This one was kind of a double whammy. It was really, really hard and really upsetting. But as always, thanks for hanging out with us through this wild and crazy ride.
And we will catch you on the wild side.
Bye, guys.
Later, Gators.
Hey, Wildside Tribe, don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Wildside Podcast. Make sure to tune in on Wildside Wednesdays. New episodes will drop each Wednesday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We would love to hear from you, so if you have a wild case recommendation, email us at wildsidepodcast@gmail.com. That's wildside with a C. Or share your thoughts in the comments below. As always, if you haven't heard it today, you're loved, you're worthy, and you're valuable. And we'll catch you on the flip side.